Welcome back to the Point. As I said at the top of the show, a number of people say they're going to run for governor. Some are out actively campaigning and getting signatures to get on the ballot already. One such candidate is Bill Gelineau. He is a Libertarian candidate, and for the first time, Libertarians will be on the primary ballot. During our conversation, he explains how that came to be and what it means for him and his party. Well, I don't need this because you and I have had this conversation before, but because I always like to make sure our viewers know who we're talking to. Tell me about yourself, your background, what's your professional background, and then we'll get to the politics.
Well, thanks, Rick. Glad to be here today. I am a Grand Rapids area businessman, husband, father. I have 6 children. Was born here in Michigan and down in the Detroit area. Went to the University of Michigan in Wayne State and eventually settled on a business career. I've done a lot of different things. I owned a restaurant on 28th Street at one time here in Grand Rapids. Subsequently, I went to work for a large national title insurance agent company, and then later started my own agency. And myself and my partners, we work out of Cascade. And I've had a long interest in politics, as you know. I'm a 2-time chairman of the Libertarian Party of Michigan, and consequently have yearned for the opportunity to build our party into something meaningful, and with our qualification as a major party as a result of Gary Johnson's showing in the 2016 presidential race, we have the opportunity to build on that. And so I made the difficult decision to step forward and seek the office of governor.
So let's talk about a couple of things that you brought up. First, I want you, from your perspective, and I understand that it may be different for others, explain Libertarian, and then we'll go to the next question, because that's also a procedural question.
Sure, and I understand that, and there is an awful lot of misperception about what a lot of people see as Libertarian. We start with freedom in all things, and in starting with small government is really important, and it's really a mantra of what I'm going to be working on. We believe that government that governs least governs best. One of our political parties talks a lot about that, and I would like to contrast myself with the positions that some of the people in that party would talk about. But we also believe in personal freedom and individual responsibility. And so the other party tends to be more associated with social tolerance. And I see myself very much in the mold of Gary Johnson, who was a 2-time very popular governor of New Mexico. The principles that he spoke about just attacking things with pragmatic and solution-oriented thinking to try to rid our government of things that really just shouldn't be involved in, either constitutionally or pragmatically. And then secondly, of course, is getting the state out of individual freedom affairs. And so sometimes Democrats like to characterize Libertarians as sort of the radical Republicans. Of course, not a lot of Republicans that are for legalization of marijuana or a lot of the other social tolerance issues, such as marriage equality and other things. And likewise, Republicans often characterize us as radical Democrats because of those social views. Of course, we don't see a lot of them talking about getting rid of the income tax entirely. Some do. I have a specific proposal that I hope we can talk about, having to do with constitutional limits and spending.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that. But I want, before we get too far away, since you already brought it up, let's talk a little bit about this major party status, because this is a change. Normally, all of your slate of candidates would have been chosen at a convention.
Correct.
That's how it's been done in the past. But that changes because, as you say, the qualification, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, got enough votes to qualify the party on the ballot, which means what for you?
Well, for me individually and any other statewide race that is not chosen at the convention, it means getting out and getting 15,000 signatures. I'm pleased to announce that we're at about 19 right now. We plan to improve on that because, as you know, not all signatures end up being valid. We want to make sure everything's validated, and we have teams of people working on that right now. So we hope to file before the first of the year, which would put us ahead of most other candidates, and certainly an opportunity to highlight to the media that we're in this game to be serious. I hope to do way beyond the simple maintaining our status at 5%.
And so what that means is there is the potential. I know other people have said they're going to run, but you'll be on the primary ballot, depending on how many other people do or don't get in.
Correct.
So that's going to be something new for people when they look at the ballot.
It is, and unfortunately, I've not personally run in a statewide race. I've been involved in them, but because so many of the districts in Michigan are gerrymandered the way they are, in both directions, we end up in a situation where for most voters, the primary is the election. And so often, because our candidates were not brought to the ballot until the general election ballot, it's harder to get the media's attention because they look at certain districts and they say that, for example, in West Michigan, the Democrats may not have any much more chance than the Libertarians do. And so getting traction about the meaning of that discussion, I think, is more difficult.
Okay, so now let's come back a little bit to what you were talking about and your plan. You said doing away with income tax. As you know, this year in the House of Representatives, the first item of business for the new speaker and for his leadership team was to have a 30-year phase out of the income tax, which as a practical matter was not likely to happen because it would presume to bind future legislatures, which you cannot do. So their fallback plan was to just get rid of the hike that happened back in the early 2000s, up to 4.25 or wherever it is, back down to 3.9. That didn't happen either.
Right.
So now you say you have a plan. What's your plan?
I do, and it's something, one of the things that's true is many of these taxes, when they're put in place, whether it's the sales tax, the income tax, many of the other taxes that we use, they're very complicated in terms of how they distribute to various pieces. I began to look at where we are. The fact is that because of the realities of what's gone on in Michigan in the last decade, our spending has come down an awful lot. In fact, we're well below the constitutional cap that's mandated by the Headley Amendment that passed in 1978. And so I went and I looked at those numbers and I said, if we're serious about small government, maybe the first thing we could do is drop that cap by 10%. So our current spending level is running about 8.1% of personal income. That limit is 9.49. So by reducing it by 10%, it actually brings it down to 8.55, which is above the spending limit we're currently at. So I don't think this is really a radical proposal, but I do think it's an important proposal because it sets that threshold that says we can't go back to being a high spending state. So it's one of the challenges that I'm going to make to the Republicans in particular who talk about small government to endorse that plan to reduce the Headley cap. I feel very fortunate that I knew Dick Headley personally. It's just a quirk of circumstance when I was involved with the JCs, and he was a former president of the U.S. JCs. And over about a 4-year period of time at his business at Alexander Hamilton in the Detroit area, when I was a young man, I got to know him pretty well. And I know how passionate he was about individual freedom and voluntarism. And that's one of the reasons why, you probably see my little thing on my coat here, I'm a big believer in voluntarism. And I began donating blood because of my belief in those things. And so I think that process of step by step eliminating things, the income tax, I think, is something that down the road we can take a look at how to do that, and it is incredibly complicated. But reducing the Headley limit we could do now, and that would start to send a message to everyone involved in the legislature that they need to focus on core priorities.
There are people, as you accurately point out, that talk about smaller government, but many of them at the same time will say, however, there are some real infrastructure needs that exist in this state. And even with the plan, as difficult as it was to come up with, to do something about infrastructure spending, specifically roads and bridges, and that infrastructure costs, by the way, or needs, go well beyond just roads and bridges. But even as difficult as that was, there are many who believe that's not nearly enough money to fix Michigan's roads. We don't have to get into a big roads discussion, but my point is, my question to you is, if you reduce Headley, if you lower the cap, how then do we get to, if you believe that those are functions of government that need to be fulfilled, how do we get there?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, but let's talk first. We're currently at a certain spending limit, a number, which I don't think needs to go up. Now, there are going to be some trade-offs, and another part of my plan, which I think is going to be a one-time opportunity, is the legalization of marijuana. And in conjunction with that, there are some things that I think we can have government stop doing. First of all, most people with any thought have put time into the fact that we need prison reform. We hold about 30% more people in our prisons per capita than their surrounding states, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois. And if we simply reduce our prison population, and I would go this far, is that if I am elected governor, I will provide clemency to all the people who have been convicted of non-violent drug crimes. And so by doing that, we're able to get people who need treatment into treatment and not give them a $45,000 a year prison bed. So those create opportunities to redirect monies to other things. The other important part of my plan that I have written on my website has to do with the strategic fund. I believe most of those functions can be gotten rid of. I don't believe in subsidizing business, not profitable businesses or future businesses or any other kind of businesses. I think that Michigan's efforts to attract business with subsidies and discounts and things that they do along those lines are very, very destructive. And it only has to come up with a couple examples. We all remember back when we were younger the Pontiac Silverdome, and it was a 25-year, $800,000 a year commitment, which in today's figures probably sounds smaller. But as the two parties have gone back and forth being in charge, we had a boondoggle with the old Lear plant at Hangar 42, which was Jennifer Granholm's favorite project. Now it's Switch, where the government is passing a specific law to subsidize one company. I think these are bad ideas. I think neighborhood enterprise zones, I'd like to see the whole town be an enterprise zone so we can lower taxes and make it more possible for entrepreneurs to really get our engine going. Things are going well in Michigan, but they can go better. And this is not a time where we need to spend a lot of money attracting businesses. There's the big auction for Amazon. I think we should just say no.
Over the past several weeks, we've introduced you to any number of candidates running for different offices here in the state. It's very early. Very few have qualified for the ballot yet, but it's important that you know who's out there and who's running. And we'll continue that here on this program on Sundays. We'll be back with more To the Point. Decision 2018 will be a big election here in Michigan, from governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, all of the House, all of the Senate. There'll be a lot of candidates to introduce you to. I hope you'll join us as we do that every Sunday morning right here, To the Point.